going on, Carl? How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jamar?
I am doing fine. I am doing well. Better that you are with me. Carl Jha. He's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast at Steel Silk, letter N. You can subscribe and support the podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl has a fantastic podcast. Every time you come on, Carl, I say it. The 5,000 years of Chinese history is just mind-blowing to me. No, man, you do great work, and so I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
I was watching this kerfuffle. I call it a kerfuffle that took place between China and Japan. Japan apparently comes out and says something to the effect of that they would intervene if China goes for reunification of Taiwan, and they would like militarily intervene. Now, when this was positioned to Trump, effectively saying, hey, Trump, this is what the Japanese prime minister has just said. Trump gave a weird statement where he said something to the effect of, a lot of our allies are not friends either. Apparently aiming that at Japan, which is wild to me, right? Because the Japanese foreign minister was jumping around on stage with Donald Trump, like, this is my great friend, this is my great buddy, our alliances, et cetera, et cetera. And Trump, because Laura Ingraham, he was on the Laura Ingraham interview, and Laura Ingraham asked him something about, well, hey, is it China? Like, China's not a friend of ours, right? And she was talking in the context of Japanese prime minister. And he was like, a lot of our allies are not our friends either. And says, basically, a lot of these countries have taken advantage of us more than China. What did Japan expect from this? Obviously, this is a sore spot.
So first of all, what the Japanese prime minister has done is quite similar to what happened a few weeks back at EU. When I talk about EU Parliament, a portion of EU Parliament, this group of parliamentarians, so-called IPAC, the Interparliamentarian Alliance on China, which is co-sponsored by none other than Marco Rubio, invited quote-unquote vice president of Taiwan to speak in the Brussels. I mean, at that time I said they're stepping on the reddest of red line on China. Now but in EU's case, they can still claim plausible deniability. They could claim, oh, it's just some crazy, we have all kind of politicians in our parliament. It's just some of our parliament have this idea, but it does not represent the all of EU. They can still say something like that. But for Japan, this is very unambiguous. This is spoken by Japanese prime minister, who just recently took office, by the way. And you can't say there's no plausible deniability about this. This is very clear. She said, if China is going to, send its warship into the Taiwan Strait, that is an existential issue for Japan that will necessitate our military involvement. Now, this is very triggering for China. So first of all, when it comes to Taiwan, for China and Chinese people, this is a very emotional issue. I mean, to make an analogy, this is Ukraine is an emotional issue for Russia and many Russian people. In very similar vein, Taiwan is very emotional issue for the Chinese people. And if you just add Japan to that mix, that's a tinderbox, because the whole reason, there's a separation status between Taiwan and China. The first time that happened was under Japanese occupation when, after the first Sino-Japanese War of 1894, 1895, China was forced to give up Taiwan to the Empire of Japan, and then Taiwan became a Japanese colony for 50 years. After World War II, Japan was forced to give Taiwan back to China. So given that history, and now a Japanese prime minister saying that, they're going to send the Japanese military to Taiwan Strait. If the war there's a famous Taiwan influencer called Jim Boss. He commented on this. He said, well, if the possibility of war is around like 0.2%, when you add in Japan, suddenly the possibility became like 8,500%. and when there's this whole idea of that this existential issue for Japan is obviously bogus, because Japan, she had to say that to justify getting around Japan's peace constitution. Article 9 of Japan's peace constitution says Japan should not maintain a military and should only maintain a self-defense force that defends Japan. But ever since like the US, when US start realizing that it alone cannot contain China, you had to encourage right-wing Japanese politicians to essentially scrap that peace constitution. That this got a major push under Shinzo Abe. This is why Shinzo Abe is a big favorite of many right-wing in America or in the West, because Shinzo Abe gave a big push to justify, if our allies involved in wars around Japan, then we, as our allies, we're obligated to send aid. But it's still that he didn't say. He's talking about like a support role, maybe Japan for the U.S. military, but he did not say like we are gonna straight up send Japanese military into Taiwan. So first of all, China considered Taiwan part of China, so this is an internal matter for China. And for Japan, given all that bad history and bad blood, dating to World War II, and come out and say we are going to militarily intervene in Taiwan against China. By saying that, by militarily intervene if such scenario arise, Japan will make it an existential issue for Japan, because like I say, China, because it's an emotional issue for China, you cannot expect China to stay rational when it comes to the issue of Taiwan. China can stay rational on many, many issues, but when you cross that red line on Japan, you're on the path toward war with China. Yeah, I mean, that's 100% guaranteed. China has said many, many times over and over and again, right, that Taiwan independence or any push for Taiwan independence is a red line. We're going to go to war. And if Japan or US decide to intervene militarily, that's World War III. It's gonna be on. I mean, like, and no matter, people will say, "Oh, what about the cost? Would Japan, China trade Beijing for Taipei or for Tokyo?" Look, you need to understand, this is an emotional issue. When it's an emotional issue, all that calculus, rationality, throw out the window. It's gonna be war. Okay, it's gonna be war. Nukes will be flying. So people should just calm the fuck down and say, why do we need to escalate to that scenario, right? I mean, like, Taiwan is none of your business, and especially for Japan with their own colonial baggage, it's like you should stay the F out. And U.S. has pursued the so-called strategic ambiguity toward Taiwan for a long time, which means they will neither confirm nor deny that U.S. will come to the aid of Taiwan in the case of war. They have been very carefully maintained that strategic ambiguity until very recently, until like when Joe Biden was asked, would U.S. defend Taiwan? And Joe Biden says, yes, we would defend Taiwan. But even in that case, there is still a plausible deniability because it's freaking Biden. Now, nobody takes what Biden says seriously. And so, the White House did come out and slow walk back Biden's statement afterwards. But this is a very non-senile Japanese prime minister speaking about this. There's no plausible deniability about this. Yeah. And they are breaking the strategic ambiguity that even U.S. is very careful to tread. I mean, that from that you can kind of see why Trump will make a statement like, not all our allies are our
Trump
friends.
Was like, hey man, not all these people are our buddies. That statement is hilarious because Laura Ingraham seemed to be shocked by it, right? Laura Ingraham was like, well, China's not our friend, right? It was like, hey, not our allies, our friends either. And you're like, what, who? And just to be very clear on this, to back your point up, Chinese ambassador to Japan, what is it, Wu Jinghao, I believe, posted on X on both Japanese and Chinese, saying Taiwan is an acceptable part of China and how they resolve Taiwan question is a matter for the Chinese people themselves to decide. Quote, the idea that Taiwan contingency is a contingency for Japan attempts to drag Japan onto a chariot to divide China, which will ultimately lead Japan to a wrong path of no return, unquote.
People need to understand something. When it comes to the issue of Japan, the Chinese government is a pacifist compared to the most of the Chinese population. Okay, because
Really?
like most of the Chinese population want to resettle the score of the first and the second Sino-Japanese War. You know, like they still have that memory. We Chinese people have a long memory, man. This is what Japan is afraid of. Japan is constantly, especially the right-wing Japanese politicians, they're constantly scared that China will do to them what their grandpa did in China back in World War II. This is what this is about. And at some level, you know what? A lot of Chinese population would like to see that happen. And if you freaking intervene in Japan, in Taiwan, that is a cause for war. And this is, there are many reasons why the Japanese Prime Minister said what she said, because like I said, the Japanese right-wing politician. When I say when we're talking about Japanese politicians post-war, we're really talking about who is more right-wing. You know, they're mostly all right-wing, but right now they have been going further and further to the right. You know, this started with Shinzo, even before Shinzo Abe, but Shinzo Abe was really pushing the envelope, trying to kind of make the Article 9 of the Peace Constitution obsolete. And now the new Prime Minister is basically saying, yeah, we're going to send our warship, our military outside of Japan because we think that could be an existential issue for us, which is completely bogus. How is she's talking about maybe a Chinese naval blockade of Taiwan would be an existential issue from Japan, which is bogus.
Yeah, nonsense.
Japan is not getting its energy from Taiwan. You know, like this is not an existential issue for Japan at all. But I think there's two possibilities that could be going on. One possibility is there is a collusion between the right-wing Japanese politicians who want to get rid of the peace constitution, because they want to, quote unquote, be a normal country so they can have a full-fledged military again. And then the push from Washington, who wanted their ally Japan and South Korea to take on more of a burden to come from China, because we mentioned on your show many times, the U.S. Navy have a serious problem of lagging behind the shipbuilding capability. China has 200 times the shipbuilding capability than U.S. So right now, the U.S. Navy is already trying to offshore some of the work of retrofitting warship in Korea and Japan, and they also, because they do realize if they want to fight China in China's neighborhood, they have to cross a tyranny of distance of the entire Pacific. So they must make sure Japan and South Korea will stay involved, so U.S. can use their bases, in Okinawa, in Japan, to get inside a fight over the Taiwan scenario. But it's very interesting because United States, even up to this point, is still very careful. They kind of skirt around the red line, but they try not to overstep it. But then you have all these U.S. vassals, like you saw what happened with the EU parliamentarian, and now with the Japanese prime minister, that's kind of openly flaunting China's red line. I think it served a couple purposes. One purpose, of course, to bind those vassal states of the United States even tighter onto the U.S. war wagon, and sabotage their own relationship with China. Two, this so does United States doesn't have to come out and straight and say it, and because this is our allies. Trump can always disavow this action of their allies, right? And you're like, oh, they're not really our friends.
It's like, that chick's
They
crazy. Yeah, I don't have anything to do with that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. They have to know that's a red line. They have to know the history associated with it. I mean, I guess I compare it to, let's say, the history in the United States, for example, among like slavery, civil rights, those type of things, and how some of those things are hot button issues. Like even today, like you're talking about like 60, 70 years on. And so you can imagine, or even Germany, right? Germany seems to want to settle the score for getting their ass kicked in the last World War. Like, meaning this stuff lingers. It doesn't just go away when the wars stop, per se. No, it's wild. That comment is just kind of outlandish. Of course, Taiwanese DPP endorses, how do you pronounce her name? Takachi's statement. China has urged them to retract that statement. I don't necessarily know if Japan is going to retract the statement or not. But either way, that's a bad look for Japan, especially given the history between Japan and China. Very bad.
I think Japan, because Japan itself is also facing a lot of issues, economic issues. Part of it is because, Japan has a lot of competitive edge of Japan got neutered by the United States since the 1980s Plaza Accord. And, U.S. actually back then took a sledgehammer to the Japanese semiconductor industry, which back then were world leading. And so now Japan's economy is not doing well. Its population is shrinking. So the politicians might thought, okay, well, we can always try war. We can always try to boost our military industrial complex, right? To shore up our flagging economy, the way that Hitler did, before World War II. Let's just inject all the money into the military industrial complex to produce weapons. That will provide more employment. Of course, that will only be temporary. It's not sustainable, unless you go to war. So I mean, that's the path they're on right now, because they can't just deal with the fact that now there's a rising China next door, which for the last couple hundred years, Japan has kind of looked down upon, as like this old decadent East that they have left behind to embrace the Western model, right? I mean, Japan that literally had a slogan called "Leaving Asia, Joining Europe," right?
Really?
For them, it's
Did
like,
they?
yes. Yeah, it's like joining civilization, right? Joining the civilization of the West, and by abandoning like the old linkage with old Asia, which is represented foremost by China. So right now they are not happy with the whole balance shift toward China, and so they're going down with that ship. They're gonna they're gonna go try to die on the hill of the whole Japan superiority, but we're gonna have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I assume that they thought the United States would back them up on this. That the U.S. would be like, "Hey, we're going to back Taiwan, or we're going to back Japan." Meaning, I get the sense that they're getting this kind of signal, either implicit or explicit, from the U.S. And the U.S. at the very least, Trump was like, "Yeah, dude, no, we've just had a trade war. We're not trying to escalate. We're calling this a day for the time being," and left her out hanging. So
there could be another reason, is because they also saw which wind the wind is blowing. They saw the Pentagon paper leak, whereas U.S. says we're going to deprioritize containing China. We're gonna pivot to Latin America to lay the kibosh on Venezuela, and then Japan will be like, whoa, wait a minute, what about us? You can't leave us hanging here.
Interesting.
Like you don't forget about us, right? So because for ironically for the Japanese right wing, they made like Japan-US security pact like the cornerstone of their policy. Like So for US to kind of leave the Western Pacific, that will be like, oh, we're gonna be left alone to face the wrath of China. No. We gonna have to make a scene to make sure you stay involved, right? And this will further validate why Trump said what Trump said. It's like, dude, that bitch is crazy, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. That puts you. It's like Europe, for example, where Europe is like, hey man, we'll take the 15% tariffs. We'll buy $700 billion of energy. We'll buy $700 billion of weapons. Don't leave us, daddy. Like, meaning doing everything in their power to keep the United States involved in Europe and in NATO. And it sounds like you're saying Japan is doing something very similar of like, hey, we're going to make a scene to try to keep the United States involved in Asia. We don't like this idea of you pivoting away from Asia. We want you to stay here. You're a cornerstone of our defense. That's interesting. I guess I never thought of it in those terms, but I guess you may not be wrong on that. I mean, that could be why. And to be honest, it could be both, right? Yeah. I mean, it was only a few months ago where Hegseth was like, hey, are you guys willing to die for the dignity of America? And Australia and some of the other countries are like, yeah. Can you reframe that? Can you say that in a different way? Yeah. So maybe it could be a few of those things, right? But where she believes that her relationship with the U.S. is closer than what it is, not realizing we could take or leave any of these people. Like, it's not, it just wasn't our interest.
They have to realize they're not Israel. Okay, they're not Israelis, so everybody have to take a back seat. I'm sorry, Israelis they're the golden boy, right? They will always take priority over all of you. Like, so, Japanese, Taiwan, you guys are just peons. You're like pawns. Israelis, okay, that they need to be protected because they're golden child.
Explain to me China's vote or in the UN Security Council. I am always baffled by China and Russia policy regarding Israel. It's not that I have an expectation that these guys are going to go to war. I don't expect that. But both China and Russia gives a statement effectively saying, this deal sucks. Like, they didn't need all the words, right? They could have just said, this sucks. But they added more words to it. They effectively, Russia was making a point of saying, this is not going to accomplish what they said it's going to accomplish. We believe it's going to be the opposite. There's no pathway for a two-state solution, especially given the comments by Israel effectively saying this is off the table. China gives somewhat of a similar statement, effectively saying this still sucks. This is not going to accomplish what they're saying it is. Both countries abstain. And they use this idea that the Arab nations that are vassals of the U.S., that both Russia and China know are vassals of the U.S., agree with the deal. Okay, why abstain from this if they know that this deal, quote unquote, sucks?
Well, look, I mean, the China and Russia, they cannot be more pro-Palestinian than the Arabs. Okay, and right now, all the Arab nations are, especially the Gulf Arab countries, they're all going willy-nilly. Like. So for China and Russia, there's only so much they can do, especially when they're all involved in their own stuff. Like for Russia, this is a very existential struggle in Ukraine, and for China, they are still confronting the trade war and possible tensions over Taiwan. Those are their strategic priorities, and for there's a lot of expectation among many global South countries that China and Russia should take the lead, but at some point those Arab countries need to stand up and really do what they said they would do. It's
they're vassals. Yeah. They're like Japan, right? Like, we're just talking about Japan and their policy and how they we're this decadent East. We're moving to the West. Okay, well, they're all of the military bases that are in Japan and everything else. Does Japan have an independent foreign policy? No. Does Europe have an independent foreign policy? No. Do these Arab Gulf states have an independent foreign policy? No.
Yeah, but if China and Russia were, say, to exercise veto, right? Guess what would happen? They will they will be blamed for obstructing the peace process. The whole narrative machine of the Western control media will say, oh, it's because in China and Russia, that's why people are dying in Gaza.
Yeah.
Because they're the one they're doing the grandstanding, for their own, anti-West stands to make the Arabs, to make the Palestinian die for it. That's how they will spin it. I mean, I guarantee you. But yeah, so I mean, the deal sucks, obviously. But right now, what you can't. The thing is, you can't always expect China and Russia to fight your battles.
Totally agree. And I've been in arguments with people who are, let's say, more in the Middle Eastern camp, because there's this belief that, as you pointed out, they should be more aggressive on this. They should be leaders in this front. And obviously, that is never going to be the case. Countries are realists, and they're going to look out for their own self-interest. And I don't have an expectation beyond the point of them looking out for their own self-interest. Is there a more cynical reason, too? This idea that this deal is going to go bad, and they know it's going to go bad.
Well, I mean, they pretty much said as much, and also
they did.
People say, why don't China and Russia confront Israel? Israel is not really Israel. Israel and United States is the same animal, right? We're really talking about why is China and Russia not confronting United States. But U.S. unfortunately still pack a lot of punch. Still have a lot of military power, financial power, and right now the U.S. Russia and China are still concentrating in their own neighborhood. They're not at the point where they want to challenge United States globally. I don't think we're there yet.
I get the sense that the challenge, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and I was pointing out to her that the main fight that's taking place, it's not really over the issue of, it's not going to be on, let's say, Gaza. It's not going to be on some of the other ancillary issues. It's going to be in the sphere to which they're engaging the U.S. So for Russia, it's going to be in Ukraine. For China, it's going to be on tariffs, providing we don't necessarily go to a larger war. And it's going to be this kind of destruction of the Western hegemony under those models, leading to this kind of new world that these guys are focused on, not on the specific individual issue of one, let's say, one particular country. Because, people have this idea of BRICS. Like BRICS is supposed to get involved in these international issues. And I don't really have that point of view. My point of view is all of these countries are realist countries with different governments and everything else. They're going to work in their interests. Give me your take on that. Have you noticed that many of the countries, or many people, especially in the global South, have this idea that BRICS is supposed to be more aggressive than what it has been?
Well, I have said many times, China's goal is never to destroy United States or even to dislodge United States as the global hegemon. China just want US to be a normal country, that China can continue to do business with. But unfortunately, that's not what US has in mind, because US has a zero-sum mentality. I think both China and Russia would deal with U.S. as equals. Would prefer to deal with U.S. as normal countries, but U.S. is not thinking of itself as a normal country, thinking of itself as a global hegemon. It must be getting into everybody's business. So the BRICS is not it's only in the kind of zero-sum mentality of the Washington elite that BRICS is somehow anti-U.S. alliance or anti-Western alliance. The BRICS is really about asserting the country's own priorities and own sovereignty in the face of a imperial Western hegemony. But they're not seeking to say, destroy the United States, right? That's
Right.
not the intention of the BRICS. But when you come to the issue with kind of the relationship between U.S. and Israel, we have to be real. As long as the U.S. exists, it will continue to support Israel.
Right.
Israel itself actually would not be able to exist for long if U.S. does not exist.
Right there.
So I mean, this is why I say they're basically the same animal. They're not two distinct entities here. If U.S. dies, Israel would not be able to exist.
Yeah. Agreed.
And yeah, I mean, like, even though it's not true vice versa, U.S. can perfectly live on without Israel, but the U.S. elite has been so captured that there's no way they will abandon Israel. I mean, I don't see a path for that, even in the immediate future. I just don't see how U.S. will ever give up on Israel. That means, they're the same animal. If you want to, on the Israel issue, you are really about confronting the U.S.
Agreed. No, I agree with you. Totally agree. They're our aircraft carrier in the Middle East for all intents and purposes. People always have this idea of the dog with the tail wagging the dog. I don't think it's the tail wagging the dog. Whatever Israel does is U.S. policy. There may be gradations. There may be differences, kind of, sort of. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to back our aircraft carrier. When we have a dirty job to do, they're going to do it for us. So no, I agree with you. It's not, you're not dealing with the individual nation in this case. So no, agreed. Another issue I wanted to hit. So apparently China was in talks with the new Syrian government. And I didn't quite understand what was going on with this. Some of the reports were saying that some of the fighters from Xinjiang province, some of the terrorists in that region, were going to be sent back to China. And China was seemingly forging a relationship with the new Syrian government. What's going on with this? I have to be very honest with you. I didn't know anything about the relationship between these two countries.
Right. Well, things have really took a turn. I mean, like the guy who is former head, quote unquote, former head of Al Qaeda in Syria, Giuliani. He was in Washington, being in the White House, and he was getting Fox News exclusive interview. But he also traveled to, Moscow. He met Putin, right? So every other world leader have met him now, like except China. What's China gonna do? But I don't think they will ever work out a deal where Syria is gonna send back the Uyghur fighters, because there are just too many of them. They're the estimate ranging from 5,000 to like 20,000. If you include in their families.
That many.
And I think only thing that could, I mean, maybe what Giuliani could offer China is the same deal that Taliban offered to China, which is, okay, we'll make sure these guys stay here and they don't go back to China to cause trouble. Right. This is basically the Taliban deal with China, that we'll keep this Uyghur fighters in Afghanistan, so they don't go back to Xinjiang to cause trouble for you, and we will limit whatever anti-Chinese activity they will do from Afghanistan. And I think if Giuliani is seeking recognition from China, that might be some of the deal that he might offer to China. And right now we're still at kind of the two sides are still meeting in the bargaining phase, basically. It's too early to tell, but I think that's Giuliani might go for the Afghan Taliban approach, to say, hey, we see you guys are cool with the Taliban now in Afghanistan. You are having a trade relationship with Afghanistan. We could do the same. We'll just, I know you guys don't want these Uyghur fighters to cause trouble for you. We'll make sure they stay where they are, stay put. We'll keep an eye on them, make sure they don't cause trouble for you. That might be the deal they're offering China right now. This is my guess.
Interesting. Because, it's like, we'll keep these lunatics here. Because, at
Yeah.
one point after Syria fell, they were like, now we're going to go back to China. And it's like, whoa, whoa. No, you may be right about that. Like, either we're sending these guys back to be in prison, or we're going to keep these guys here so they don't cause trouble. One or the other may work in the context of some kind of negotiation between the two sides. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, one is easier to do. One
Yeah.
is definitely much easier to do than the other, because if they try to extradite, 5,000 fighters, they're gonna have a civil war, right? They're gonna have a fight. So they'll probably, more realistic approach I can see is kind of the Taliban solution. Now, whether China is gonna take that deal, whether that there's gonna be offer recognition, that's still on the table. Well, that's still way to be seen. I think right now the two sides are approaching this to see, if there's any agreement can be had.
Well, there. Oh, okay.
But either way, for China, there's less at stake. For Russia, because Russia, they like to maintain their naval
Military
presence
bases
on the Mediterranean. Yeah. They like to maintain their ports in Syria, so that's their top priority, to keep the Russian port in Syria. To do that, they have to work out some deal with existing power that be in Damascus. In China, well, China doesn't have a port in Syria. I mean, China doesn't have too much presence in Syria, in fact. So, only thing China can offer is some kind of investment or some kind of recognition. So there's much less at stake for China to offer that recognition. So we'll kind of have to see. We're like the Giuliani have to put up some really juicy offer here to get what he wants from China.
Entice. See, I thought that Giuliani might want to get rid of, like, basically. One of my guests who covered Syria, she pointed out that ISIS has a employment drive, I call it that, and that a lot of the people who are there don't necessarily like Giuliani's relationship with Israel, don't like Giuliani's relationship with the U.S. I mean, for God's sake, the guy goes to America, right? It's obviously he's going to America. You can see it, and that he may want to get rid of these people out of the country just for his own sake. Like, all right, I need these lunatics out of the country now. How can I get rid of these guys? Oh, China, hey, would you like some of these fighters back? That type of thing. But no, what you're saying makes sense, though. It could very well just be keep them there. No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Explain something to me. Taiwan has to know that their politics is better served with China. I mean, they have all sorts of diplomatic, let's say, economic ties with the mainland. How on earth do they continuously elect people who are, let's say, antagonistic to China and more closely related to the United States? That's so
you're assuming Taiwan is a monolithic bloc, right? But it's not. Taiwan has as many political factions as there are in United States. Actually, even more. I mean, U.S. just have a uniparty. Taiwan actually do have political parties that differ significantly, especially when you come to the cross-strait relationship, right? Especially the new president for the KMT on Taiwan. She said we should work for a peaceful relationship with mainland China. There's no reason to have an antagonistic, hostile relationship. Right. But the current government, the current ruling party, that's in control right now. Let's remember, the last election, they won 40% of the vote. The current quote unquote president of Taiwan, Lai Ching-te, he won 40% of the vote, which means 60% of the people voted against him. But the only problem, he became the president because the opposition vote was split between two opposition parties. So it was like 40, 30, 30, right? So that's how he won the presidency. And currently there's a lot of disillusionment sitting in Taiwan with DPP, particularly their economic policy, which is, let's face it, Taiwan's main economic pillar is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductors. And
Right.
the U.S. government policy has been, we'll take the TSMC to Arizona. So in case we lose Taiwan, it doesn't matter. We will have TSMC in Arizona, right? That's Taiwan's crown jewel. And that doesn't help Taiwan. This is essentially they're hollowing out Taiwan's crown jewel and taking it to America. And the U.S. even go as far as say, in case of war, they will bomb TSMC, so China will get nothing. And so yeah, so
that's God, that's wow. We would blow it up if we need. That would be a new Nord Stream, right?
So there's a lot of discontent currently with the ruling part, but you never heard about that. You never hear that from the English language press. Recently there was like hundreds of thousands of people protesting against the existing government in Taiwan. Again, almost zero coverage in the English mainstream media, because you won't fit the narrative like, oh, Taiwan is supposed to be this plucky democracy standing up to the authoritarian mainland China. Well, what do you mean the Taiwan government is prosecuting opposition leaders? What do you mean they're jailing the opposition party leaders? What do you mean the opposition is organizing hundreds of thousands of people to come to the street to protest the Taiwan government? That would be too confusing to the English language audience, right? So that's why they just chose not to cover that at all. I actually recently interviewed a couple of commentators from Taiwan to talk about this. I think what they think is a political ground shift in Taiwan. More people are now gradually coming to terms with rising China, and the idea is, Taiwan has hitched its boat with United States, the global hegemon, for the last 40 years. Well, if the U.S. is going down, there is no sense to go down with the ship. Why not to just hook up with your cousins across the strait on mainland China? You can still hitching on the ride of a rising global power. Then you're still good. You're still good. Life can still be good. So there's already a lot of people in Taiwan. They are, they're realist, right? They're very pragmatic. So when the push comes to a shove, they will know what to do. So I'm not worried about Taiwan. I don't think there's realistic scenario of a war breaking out imminently over Taiwan Strait. But if Japan is going to send its military, then all bets are off. All bets are off. But right now, I think we're still good.
Are the two political parties that are, let's say, pro-China or at the very least pro-Taiwan, are they're
not? Yeah, there's.
What doesn't say pro-Taiwan? Really. Well,
I mean, all the political party claim they're pro-Taiwan, but there's the ruling party. Their party platform is actually Taiwan independence. It's written in their party platform, and for them, the way to antagonize China is a way, actually, for them for the longest time, it was a way to get vote, because what happened during Hong Kong protest 2019 is they really crank up the media campaign in Taiwan, saying, look at what happened in Hong Kong. This is what happened if China takes over, right? This is why you got to vote for us, because we will stand up for Taiwan, right? That's how they scare people to vote for them. But that tactic has been working for a long time, but until it no longer works, because eventually people realize, China is not coming over anytime soon to take over militarily, but you're not doing anything to improve our livelihood. You're not making our economy better. We're not looking toward a better job prospect. We're not, our children are not, hopeful for the future, and that could be a problem. That's a problem for the ruling party. You sometimes you actually have to deliver. So those are the things. So I'm actually hopeful, on the Taiwan issue. I think a lot of contradictions will eventually resolve themselves. Like I was talking with Shang Yu, a rapper based in Taiwan. He actually said, outside of the big cities like Taipei or whatever, If you go to the countryside, a lot of people they have these dishes. They receive all the channels from mainland. They watch like TV shows from mainland China because it's the same culture, right? Like there's not much barriers, right? That separates Taiwan and mainland China culturally. So with the rise of China, the gravitational pull of mainland China will even be stronger on people of Taiwan.
So their belief is effectively, look, we don't need a war, we don't need conflict, we don't need any of this stuff. Just our economy, culture, these things are going to pull Taiwan to us just inexorably anyway. I mean, we may get a random political party that's antagonistic, but for all intents and purposes, over the course of time, they will reintegrate with us.
Yeah.
If a new political party got in office that was not an independence party, would they be able to make moves towards China in that way?
Well,
I mean, the United States is military on the soil.
I mean, we see. I mean, before the DPP party get into power, back in 2010s, when KMT had the presidency, they actually were making moves to further integrate the economy. They were about to sign a free trade deal with China. And then there was a soft color revolution that happened in Taiwan. There was a bunch of youth who occupied the parliament. It's called the Sunflower Movement. And they and that scuttled the deal. And that brought in the DPP into the presidency following the election. And so those I was talking with people in Taiwan, particularly Xiang Yu. He think, yeah, that's definitely a color revolution. A lot of these so-called student leaders have the backing of all these like NED or NED adjacent funding, and so U.S. still have a lot of power in Taiwan. They can always sabotage the straight relationship. But I think over long term, I'm optimistic over long term. I'm not saying this is like kind of there's going to be a sea shift anytime soon, like a flip-flop in the public opinion 180 degrees. But I think gradually, slowly, the gravitational pull of mainland will be able to pull Taiwan back.
Last question. Indonesia. I've just left Indonesia. Loved the country. I was in Jakarta for 2 months. Apparently, I was an illegal immigrant because I overstayed my visa by 2 days. That scared the shit out of me at the airport.
Don't overstay the visa, man. You have to pay.
Don't do that, right? Yeah,
I made the mistake before.
Did you?
You're gonna have to pay. Don't do that.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going to take place because the guy, the security guard is like pissed off at me, right? And it's like,
no, you just have to pay. They'll just make you pay. That's what's going to happen. They're going to make sure you pay.
It's so expensive. Like they charge you like $100 a day every day that you overstay your visa, something like this, close to it.
I paid $700 one time because that's when I first met with my wife. We were vacationing on an island, and I totally forgot about renewing my visa. And then after I got back, I was like, "Oh crap! I overstayed 7 days. I had to pay $700." So yeah.
Ouch! Yeah, when you're at the airport and you try to get out, and it's like, "Hey man, my passport's not working. Come with me." It's like, damn it. Yeah, man. They weren't dicks about it, but they were obviously very stern and didn't necessarily like the fact that you overstayed your visa. It was only about 2 days. I just got the days wrong. While I was there, I was watching the event with Trump and the various other leaders. And the president, I think it was prime minister, goes to Trump and says, "I need to talk to your son." And he says, "I'm, how do you say, we're not safe." He says something to that effect, "We're not safe." What does he mean by that? Is he concerned about, while I was there were protests at various locations in Indonesia. Is he thinking that this is a color revolution and that, let's say, there are other forces that are behind this, that it's not necessarily organic? And if he deals with Trump, he could somehow put the kibosh on the protests? I mean, we just saw the Gen Z, as you point out, the Sunflower Movement. These are like Gen Z protests. They even have a name now, where you get a bunch of kids, throw those kids at a government because they don't know anything about anything.
Well,
and
mean,
allow them to try to overthrow the government. Is that what he's
so
concerned about? Because I didn't
well,
understand what he was talking about.
I have no idea too. I can't speak for any world leader. I have no like special contact with them. But
Yeah,
the protests. I mean, I understand why people protest. Like the youth in Indonesia, they facing. I mean, some same problem that the youth in the West faces. They face a very competitive job market.
yes,
They think the economy is not. Indonesia is still a very young country, so it has a lot of young people. And the thing is, Indonesia is still not growing. It's growing pretty fast, but not fast enough to provide jobs for all these young people entering the job market. Um,
right.
and they're not happy about the government corruption. There's a lot of corruption in Indonesia, so all these things are very understandable.
Mhm.
But what is not understandable is people firebombing government buildings and burning government workers to death. Um,
Right.
and I was told, it's not the students that do it. It's not the students who are firebombing the government buildings. And so that, what does that mean? Does that mean they're provocateurs? I mean, it's possible. And I would not, from my limited interaction with young Indonesians here, I also don't think average students would just go
Yeah.
certainly go
It's
attack
like I'm in
government
class and then all of a
installations.
sudden I'm going to firebomb a
Yeah,
government building. That seems a bit
yeah,
extreme.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I can't say, but I have to. Only thing I know is a lot of my Chinese Indonesian friends were very worried because they remember what happened in 1998. Yeah,
What happened in
because
1998?
well, the protests against the government turned against the Indonesian Chinese community. A lot of the
Oh,
Indonesian Chinese community, many people were killed, raped, many had to flee the country. So a lot of Chinese Indonesian were very traumatized by what happened in 1998. And my circle of friends, they're usually my age. So they were there in 1998, when they experienced that. So I could see they're trying to maintain a calm demeanor, but I could see, they were very, very worried when the protests break out. But I mean, so far it looks like it's contained. Hopefully hopefully the economy will keep growing fast enough to provide more job opportunity for the young people in Indonesia. I mean,
yeah.
right now there's a lot of as long as Indonesia can maintain its stability, I think the future is still quite bright because the
Mhm.
rise of China will lift all boats in the neighborhood. Right now, there's a lot of investment flowing out of China into Indonesia. A lot of manufacturing is coming to Indonesia as part of the supply chain is now moving out of China. But a lot of this is part of that is the Trump tariff. But now that what the Trump tariff actually did is now instead of simply supply chain moving out of China, now you have an integrated supply chain that composed of China and all the surrounding neighborhood. Because
Yeah.
especially the countries in Southeast Asia, they will get
Yeah.
the manufacturing first. Like I saw Frank, what is that? Fareed Zakaria was saying on Twitter, was saying, "Oh, India is gonna be the next manufacturing superpower. It's going to replace China." I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's actually going to be Southeast Asia that will benefit the most because, first of all, Southeast Asia is in the same time zone. Most of Southeast Asia is in the same time zone or just 1 hour difference with
Yes.
China, and they have cultural proximity and geographic proximity. So this is why it's a lot easier to ship Chinese machine tools and parts straight from factories in Pearl River Delta to ports in Vietnam, Thailand, or Indonesia. So what the Trump tariff actually just accelerated existing trend, which is Chinese capital are coming to Southeast Asia and the Chinese supply chain is getting integrated with the supply chains in Southeast Asia. So now, this is why I am pretty fairly optimistic about Southeast Asia. I think like I said, when the rise of China will lift all boats in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I love Jakarta. I thought it was great. I had no issue with Indonesia. In fact, I actually like Malaysia also. And I like Malaysia so much, I even thought about going back to Malaysia at the end of travels. Last thing before I let you go. Since you brought up tariffs, this is your favorite president talking about tariffs.
I hear they're doing that, and that's okay with me. They're passing legislation, or the Republicans are putting in legislation that very tough. It's sanctioning, et cetera, on any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned. We may add Iran to the formula, yeah.
So 500% tariffs on Russia, China, India, and any other random country. I would imagine he means even European countries that are getting oil from the back end. This is clownish. Do you even believe Taco is gonna like? Even if that came to his desk, do you think Taco would sign that bill?
Look, we have been through this. We have been doing this for the last 8 months, man. I mean, 7 and 8 months. Like, who is he kidding? Like
I don't know.
He gotta have to keep the appearances, and he gotta keep appearances of winning, right? Winning so much that you'll be tired of winning. I think by now everybody's tired of winning. Just stop it already. Just please stop.
It's like, dude, you're winning too much, man. Calm down. Carl, man, I always appreciate these conversations, and I thank you for it. Honest to God, I really do. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding region and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast at Steel Silk N, the letter N, and subscribe to his podcast on patreon.com/silk and steel. Carl, you have a fantastic show, Carl. And I thank you for joining me, man. You be safe, okay?
Thank you. Anytime.